pivot, fail fast, all these buzzwords, bullshit. It's not okay to fail. You should do everything you can to prevent failure.
What's one question you wish people asked more of from your time working at Apple, working with Steve?
Frankly, I wish people stop asking me about working for Steve Jobs. For one thing, they all think, what an asshole to work for. I've come to look back on the toughest coaches, toughest bosses, and they teach you the most. That's what life was like. You had to prove yourself every day.
Before we dive in, I want to extend a warm invitation to join our thriving Foundr community. It's the perfect place to discover more insightful interviews aimed at helping you build, grow, and scale your business. So don't forget to hit subscribe. Your support means the absolute world to us. Thank you so much for subscribing. Let's get stuck in today's discussion.
Hear the stories, learn the proven methods, and accelerate your growth and future through entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Foundr Podcast with Nathan Chan.
As I shared, it's been almost 10 years since we chatted before the pandemic. I think it was early days Canva. You just became, I think, chief evangelist for Canva. That was 2015. We chatted in 2017. So it was early days Foundr. I've made the transition from founder to CEO. Lots happened, but what's changed in your life?
What's changed in my life since 2017? How long have you got? I've moved houses. I've stayed with Canva since 2014, so that has not changed. I have become an ardent podcaster. I just finished this book. Most of my kids are out of the house now. I mean, lots has changed. One bad thing is a couple years ago, I lost almost all my hearing. So the way we're doing this interview is I have a cochlear implant. And what city are you in?
Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, well, my cochlear implant is from Sydney. There's a company called Cochlear in Sydney, and they make the best implant. So I basically the hearing cells in this ear are gone. So the implant is a microphone, and electronically it communicates the signal directly to the auditory nerve. So, I'm a walking miracle of hearing. You know what? You know why I lost my hearing? Is listening to all the shitty pitches from entrepreneurs. I swear to God, why do you laugh? How can you laugh at my deafness? That's tasteless. My God.
You know what's funny? Okay, now this is getting good. We've both spoken at similar conferences, and there was one conference, I don't even know if it runs anymore, Social Media Marketing World by Michael Stelzner.
In San Diego.
Yeah, in San Diego. And I spoke at that conference. I think you headlined it or something like that. And I spoke at that conference. I was one of the 50 or 100 plus speakers. And I met a guy that said all he wanted to do was pitch you his SaaS social media tool that was like, not like Canva, but like something like it was a SaaS social tool, and he really wanted to pitch you. That's so funny. You brought back that memory, because like I met him and after a drink session, he's like, "Yeah, I've got to speak to Guy. I'm going to pitch him. So how many pitches you get, man?
Enough to make you deaf. Yeah, and that guy's name was Sam Altman, and if I had listened to him, I would be a billionaire today, right? And social media marketing world was why Zach from Canva was in the United States. And so Zach and I, and then Melanie and Cliff also happened to be there, I think for something else. So that kind of crystallized our meeting. And, that's when they first found me, and the rest is history. But that was 2013 or 14.
Yeah. This would have been for me, social media marketing, I think like 15, 16, 17, probably after we interviewed, maybe even, probably around that time. But small world. There you go.
That whole era is one big blur now. I can barely narrow down the decade that something happened, much less the year.
Yeah. So, look, your resume is rich with accomplishments. Chief evangelist at Apple. You've done incredible things at Motorola. But what was Guy searching for at 22 years old? Like, a lot of our audience community, early stage with their business, in between their 20, 30s, mid to late 30s.
22 years old.
Yeah.
In 1974, I was 20. So let's say 1980. Well, I got my MBA in 79. So I was in the jewelry business probably. I was schlepping gold and diamonds. So I had the most analog job. I was, selling in the jewelry business is not A/B testing. Does the blue line work better than the yellow line? Do you get 1.1% better click-through? Selling in the jewelry business was hand-to-hand combat. So our company sold to retailers who sold to the actual customer. And you learned about selling and rejection and patience. And I swear that was the best training for the rest of my life, because I've come to the conclusion, and entrepreneurs, they need to understand that. As an entrepreneur, there are only two key functions. And you do these two key functions well, everything else is easy and you can hire professionals. And the two key functions are selling and making. So most of the people in a small company, they should either be selling or making. Everything else is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you know what you, like at 22 years old, what you would be doing right now? Like, did you...
Surely you jest. I mean, anybody who tells you at 22 they knew what they were going to be doing at 69 is delusional or a pathological liar. There's no way. There's no way. I mean, as Steve Jobs said in his famous commencement address, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So I can barely connect them looking backwards. But no, there's no way. Well, for one thing, at 22 years old, how could you predict a career in personal computing or software or social media or online design service, like software as a service? Yeah, there was barely software, period. I mean, this is right after electricity was invented. So, no, it's not predictable. And yeah, that's one of the lessons in my book, that remarkable people have a growth mindset. And, it's not like I'm stuck where I was at 22 selling jewelry. I switched careers. I switched careers several times. That's a growth mindset. And that's what's necessary for entrepreneurs.
So I have to ask, just going back in that time, probably a few years later, when you rejoined Apple, when you rejoined Apple as a fellow in 1995, there was a crossroads period for the company. I'd love to know, were there any moments in time or any stories that really stuck with you that you could share with us?
Yeah, well, so, Macintosh was introduced in 84. And then in 87, 88, that's when, the you-know-what hit the wall. Steve Jobs gets fired, all that. And then Apple was sort of treading water for a while. And then Steve came back in 97 and he introduced that new iMac that was the teardrap shop with the colors like cherry and blueberry and tangerine and all that. And then there was the Think Different ad campaign. And I'll tell you, it was a very interesting time because everybody thought, well, not everybody, not Macintosh believers, but everybody outside of Apple thought that Apple was going to die. And Michael Dell is saying, Apple should give back its cash to its shareholders and close up shop because it's doomed. And yeah, you really did have to think different to believe in Apple and Macintosh back then.
Yeah, interesting. Any crazy stories working with Steve Jobs or Apple you want to share?
Sure. So one day I'm in my cube and Steve Jobs shows up with this stranger. And he asked me what I thought of this product. And I told him, Steve, it's a mediocre product, mediocre user interface, doesn't really take advantage of the Macintosh graphics and capabilities. And I just basically ripped on the product and the company. And after that, he turns and he says to me, I want you to meet the CEO of the company. So let's just say Steve completely set me up. But there's a lot to learn from that story. So number one is, you better be well informed when you work for someone like Steve, because I guarantee you that he probably thought that that product and company was crap too. And so if you had said it was great, Steve might have fired me on the spot, because it would mean that I was stupid and he did not tolerate stupidity. So you should be thorough and you should be prepared, and you should also be honest, because if you had tried to hedge that answer, you also might have been fired. So, let's just say that when you came to work in the Macintosh division, you had to prove yourself every day. That's what life was like. Now, many people, they've heard the stories and seen the movies, etc. And they all think, what an asshole to work for, how terrible. But I tell you, I am where I am because of Steve Jobs. I don't think I would have progressed in my career nearly as much without that experience. I've come to look back on the toughest coaches, toughest bosses, toughest teachers, and I've come to believe they teach you the most. And, there's a very important lesson in the categorization of assholes. So there are assholes who are mission-driven assholes, and there are assholes who are egocentric-driven assholes. So the egocentric asshole is all about me, myself, and I. Am I not brilliant? Am I not the best? Am I not the greatest? And then there's the mission-driven asshole. And the mission-driven asshole only cares that you create a great product or service, and you create customers, and you make customers, and you please customers, and nothing's going to stand in the way of that mission. That's the kind of mission-driven asshole that Steve Jobs was. He was not the egocentric he was not the egocentric asshole. He was the mission-driven asshole. So all you entrepreneurs out there are listening, I'm not saying that you have to be an asshole, but you have to be mission-driven.
And I know you get these questions all the time around kind of, working with Steve Jobs and, what was that experience like and all the great wisdom and lessons you've learnt from him. But what's one question you wish people asked more of from your experience and time working at Apple, working with Steve?
That's a lot of caveats on that question. So what's one question I wish people would ask more?
Yeah. Or what's something that people don't know that they always ask you, but they don't really get it?
Well, frankly, I wish people stop asking me about working for Steve Jobs. I mean, it's like the three questions that guy always faces are, what was it like to work for Steve Jobs? That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is, are you related to the motorcycle company? And the worst one, I got to paint you the whole scenario. So you're standing in an airport, or you're standing in a store, or, something, and somebody comes up to you making eye contact, smiling, you can see that the person wants to engage. And the person starts by saying, a few years ago, I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, with my career. I really didn't have any direction. And then I read your book, and your book changed my life. It gave me direction. It helped me get on track. And I'm like, man, this is going to be a good day. So I say to the person, well, which one of my 16 books changed your life? And I'll tell you something. Many times people say, oh, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I swear to God, that's happened dozens of times.
Hey man, look, you know what's funny? I'm half Asian, And
Yeah.
when I put on like a little bit of weight, my face kind of fills out. And when we've ran Facebook ads, there was a time period where people used to say, you know, broke version of Elon Musk, or like different variation of Elon Musk or whatever. So I feel you, man. Like I've actually been in America or been places, and they're like, are you who I think you are? And they thought I was Elon Musk. So look, I can relate, man.
Okay. Well, one pure Asian to one half Asian. Can I tell you one more story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is about, I had to be 30 years ago. I had a 911, all right? So I'm in Menlo Park, California, and I'm in my 911. And, you know, when you're driving a 911, as all Porsche owners are, you have like delusions of grandeur and superiority. So I freely admit I had those faults.
Mm.
So I pull up to the stop sign and I look to the left, and this car with 4 teenage girls is in it. And they're looking at me, smiling at me, just like the Robert Kiyosaki guy. They're looking and smiling at me and laughing. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, man, God, you have finally arrived. Even teenage girls know who you are. It's because of your work at Apple, your books, your speeches. You're so famous, man. You're like Japanese Justin Bieber guy. And so the girl in the front seat, she gives me this motion to roll down the window. She doesn't realize in a Porsche, you press a button, you don't roll the window down, but that's a different story. So I put the window down, and she sticks her head out, and she says to me, "Are you Jackie Chan?" Now, okay, so, but there's a good lesson in this. And the good lesson is that since that day forward, one of my goals in life is that someday Jackie Chan is in his S-Class or his Bentley, and he's in Hong Kong or Shanghai or wherever he lives, and pulls up to a stop sign, car full of teenage girls. They ask him to roll down his window, and the teenage girl sticks her head out and says, "Are you Guy Kawasaki?" That's my goal in life. You got to have goals in life.
Yeah, I agree. This is awesome, man. Good laughs. So let's talk about kind of, for our audience, a lot of our community, they want to start an e-commerce business. They're e-commerce founders, and they're working on a product, right? And you talked before around there's kind of really two things a successful, remarkable founder needs to work on, and that's selling and making. From your perspective, what do people need to think about when it comes to making an exceptional product that flies off the shelf? You've seen what that looks like. You've been evangelists for some of the, incredible companies, right? Like, what do people need to be thinking about?
I've been an evangelist for some crap too. So first piece of wisdom, the key to evangelism, this is called Guy's Golden Touch, is not that whatever I touch turns to gold. Guy's Golden Touch is whatever is gold, Guy touches. So what I'm trying to tell you is that if you want to be a great evangelist, you got to create or affiliate or find a great product, because it's easy to evangelize a great product and it's hard to evangelize shit. And that sounds like an obvious piece of wisdom, but you'd be surprised. So now, how do you create great products for customers? So there's several methods, and I can't tell you any single one is going to work, but there's multiple ways. So one is you create the product that you want to use. You want to use a small, cheap, easy to carry, easy to move, easy to operate computer. So you build yourself an Apple One, and lo and behold, more people want a personal computer. It's not just you. So it started with, market research. I want to build the computer I want to use. And lo and behold, lots of people were the same. And that is the genesis of many, many tech companies. The founders built what they want to use. A second path is you start from the customer and you work backwards. So rather than figuring out what you know and what you like to do and what you're good at doing, you talk to your customers and they tell you what they want and you build to that target, which is very different than saying, listen, when we like to do this, we're good at this, we're going to make this, and then we're going to make people buy it. That leads to disaster. I'll give you a classic example. So Kodak used to make film as chemicals on paper, right? And chemicals on plastic. And they didn't work backwards, but they innovated and they created the first digital camera in 1975, an engineer named Steve Sasson. Now, how many of us use Kodak digital cameras today? None of us. And why is that? It's because Kodak, they defined themselves as being a chemical company. They made chemicals. What they should have thought is they should have worked backwards from the customer and figured out that the customers wanted to preserve memories. So if you work backwards from the customer, you figure out, how can we help you preserve memories? You could help people preserve memories with chemicals on a piece of paper. You can also help preserve memories with digital sensors. And so if you had embraced this concept of, we're going to look and see, and we're going to work from the customer's needs, not our capabilities, you might have been Sony instead of Kodak. A third method is just to go and see, as opposed to read or listen to or look at dashboards, but you actually go and see how people are using your product. And even better than going and seeing is going and being. So this means that you are the customer. You are using the car or the computer. And so you know exactly what it's like. You're not doing focus groups and you're not doing interviews. You really are the customer. You know exactly the pain points. And I think those are the richest veins to create great products. And then you got to also throw in a big lump of luck, because luck, I'd rather be lucky than smart.
You don't believe you make your own luck, though?
Well, making your own luck, I think, is a semantic thing, right? So if you work backwards from the customer, if you are the customer and really know what the customer needs, if you understand what true business you should be in, preserving memories or putting chemicals on paper and plastic, I think that by doing those things, you are, in essence, making your luck.
Yeah. And when it comes to, I guess, products and ideas, you said you get pitched a lot of shitty ideas. What should people be thinking about when it comes to coming up with a business idea?
We've been discussing that for 10 minutes. Do people need this? Do people already express that they are frustrated with this? Another very good metaphor is, many entrepreneurs, they make a decision. Well, maybe they don't make a decision consciously, but from the outside looking in, there are fundamentally two kinds of products. There are painkillers and there are vitamins. So a painkiller means that, there's a real problem out there that it's too hard to update software by sending out thousands of DVDs. Why don't we update in the cloud? Why don't we have cloud-based software, right? So that's a painkiller. By contrast, you could have vitamins, and what vitamins do, they're supplements, and they make you better, or they make you feel better, they're healthier, or whatever, they're preventative. But I'll tell you something, it's much easier to create a painkiller, let me be more accurate. Painkillers and supplements are both hard to create, but it's a lot easier to sell a painkiller than a vitamin. And if you want an extreme example, I get migraine headaches. And if you ever talk to somebody with migraine headaches and you say, I have the cure for your migraine headache, I have the painkiller, I guarantee you that person will pay more for this migraine painkiller than the biggest pack of supplemental vitamins. Trust me. Man, when you got a migraine headache, you will pay anything to get rid of that headache.
Yeah, and like I love this concept, and I've seen it myself in practice, right? Like when you put out a product that is a true painkiller and you get the product right, it just flies. It's not difficult to sell it. It's not difficult to market it. Yes, you have to get the messaging right, and that can take time, but it just has this gravitational pull towards people wanting to buy it, for people wanting to use it, for people wanting to play with it, for people wanting to like consume it. And I think it's just hard to describe. Yeah.
At the beginning and the end of my career, I've been associated with two great painkillers, right? So Macintosh, the pain that Macintosh solved is that computers were too hard to use. It's not a supplement. It didn't make an IBM PC slightly better, or a Data General, or a VAX, or an IBM 360 slightly better. It wasn't a supplement. It was a painkiller. There were people who just could not use computers. And now at the end of my career, the pain that Canva solves is that there are just some people who cannot make graphics with products like Photoshop and Illustrator. It's just too expensive, too difficult, too complex. That's pain. And they want to be better communicators, and they don't want to have to find an agency to create their graphics, or wait in line for the graphics department to have time for their projects. Their pain is immediate. Like let's say you're a real estate company, and you get a new listing. You need to create flyers for your new residential listing. You're in pain, man. You need to get it out there. You need that flyer, because every day that goes by, you're losing sales, and that's pain. That's not supplements.
Hey guys, I really hope you're feeling inspired from today's interview. Now, the truth is, all successful e-commerce founders started from zero, with a spark of an idea and a whole lot of determination. But let's be real, building or growing an e-commerce business is no walk in the park. And that's where Foundr Plus comes in, which I'm really excited to share with you. It's a culmination of a decade worth of work at Foundr. So if you're feeling stuck in your e-commerce business, you're lacking confidence to move forward, or you're worried about making costly mistakes or not knowing how to grow your business, Foundr Plus is here to support you on your journey. You get access to a customized learning pathway with proven frameworks from successful e-commerce founders for fast results, incredible programs, a supportive community, weekly live mentorship, exclusive savings on startup tools, and 24/7 real human support. Try Foundr Plus today for just $1 for 7 days so you can accelerate your business goals. Visit foundr.com/start $trial or click the link in the description to claim your trial. All right, now let's jump back in the show. I'm curious as well just around mindset. I think this is a really important thing for founders. And you speak to a lot of remarkable people, hence your show, and and you're connected with like extremely incredible, successful people from all walks of life. We know that like in our community and for early stage startup founders, that confidence is a struggle that people face. How do you think people can build their confidence in the midst of failures and challenges?
This may sound like a circular reasoning, but the way you build your confidence is by succeeding. And by that, I mean, instead of waiting for you to, let's say to use a metaphor, if you wanted to build your confidence as a surfer, I do not recommend that the first place you try to surf is Nazaré or the Pipeline or Mavericks, okay? The first place you surf is a nice soft wave, 1 to 2 feet. So you build your confidence because you take a nice, long, thick, wide, soft board to a place where there's 1 or 2 foot waves. God bless you, you achieve success. Then you go out on a smaller board and you go out on a bigger wave and you go from 1 foot to 3 foot to 5 foot, 10 foot to 20 foot. maybe you continue and you go to Mavericks and now it's 60 feet. And maybe you continue and now you go to Nazare and it's 100 feet. But the way you got confidence is because you started at 1 foot. So break your goal down into small chunks that you can achieve, build confidence and build skill and go from there. I tell entrepreneurs all the time, they're trying to create this entire community and infrastructure and vertically integrate and horizontally dominate and all that. And I've said, listen, you are trying to boil the ocean. You're trying to boil the ocean. You should be trying to boil a cup. Let's just boil 1 cup right now, and then we'll worry about the ocean later. When Apple computer arguably has boiled the ocean, right, in computers and phones. But it started with an Apple I. It's not like Woz said, I envision a day where in 20 or 30 years, we have the most devices in the world. I mean, for crying out loud, he just wanted to sell the homebrew computing club a bunch of motherboards. That's the start. Just boil a cup. After you boil a cup, then you boil a pot. And after a pot, a bigger pot. And then a vat. But let's not try to boil the ocean to start.
Mm. And I'd love to hear any stories you could share of setbacks or failures that you've had in your career that really hurt, and how you work through that.
When I first tried to get into the computer business from the jewelry business, let's just say that my resume was not optimized for that transition. So I had dozens of rejections. When I became a writer, I had dozens of rejections from publishers. Even this last book, Think Remarkable, this is my 16th book. It was rejected. Yeah, I mean, after a while, you come to realize that rejection is just part of growing up. It's if you think from the outside looking in, successful people, it was easy and everybody said yes and the world just rolled over for them. You're delusional. It does not work like that. And so you get used to that, and it actually makes you stronger. And it's easy for me to say, but I mean, it took me 69 years to achieve this position. And, Macintosh, Apple almost went out of business. That was a failure. I mean, I've started software companies that, maybe we got to first base, certainly not to third base or home. And one thing I learned in technology is that, this piece of advice is going to be somewhat internally inconsistent. But one thing I learned is that it's not how many times you fail. It's only that you succeed once. So if you have 4 startups and 4 fail, but the 5th one succeeds, nobody's going to remember the first 4. Trust me. They only care about your success. Okay, now the part that conflicts with that advice is it sounds like guys saying it's okay to fail, pivot, fail fast, all these buzzwords you hear. And that's also bullshit. It's not okay to fail. You should do everything you can to prevent failure. You don't want to waste people's money and time and careers and the earth's resources because, just on a little flippant thought, you decided you try something for the hell of it to see if it works. And if it fails, no problem. It's not our money. That's a bullshit attitude. You're not going to go far with that attitude.
Mm. Yeah. And it's, one thing that's interesting is you said you get a lot of pitches, and I was just thinking to myself, do you do much angel investing?
I used to, but I really don't. I've done some. I have. It'd be interesting. I've never tallied it up. If I took all the gains and all the losses, am I positive or negative? But then, then I had this, purple cow. What are the other phrases? There's purple cow. There's unicorn, black swan.
Yep.
I had a black swan, purple cow, unicorn, farting pixie dust, and that's Canva.
Yeah.
So Canva changed all the rules.
Yeah. So look, Canva's, just their ability to execute, like, because I've watched that journey. I interviewed Melanie, I reckon early days Canva. So what it probably would have been 2015, 2016, early days Canva. I'll never forget, actually. She was so nice, such a really good person. Like, I back in the day, there was no Zoom, and I used Skype, and I used this tool called Ecamm Call Recorder. And I was just starting to go full time on Foundr, and I was doing the interview in my parents' basement, and I forgot to hit record. And it was an interview with her. Wasn't even a front cover story either. I was speaking to her and interviewing her for like 15, 20 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I forgot to hit record. And she was just so good about it. Like, so nice, not angry. And she's like, all right, let's just go again. And like, it's just been incredible.
I have been on both sides of that. Like 3 weeks ago, my co-author, Madison Neismer, and I, we interviewed someone named Jerry Lopez. And if you're familiar with surfing, Jerry Lopez is a very, very, very famous surfer. And we are both surfers, so we were so excited to interview him. We forgot to press record for the first 30 minutes. Oh, luckily, I back up all my recordings locally, so there was no problem. But, he just said, I guess we got to do this again. And now that you bring this story up, this could be I could see this. This would be a good test for, is someone empathetic and nice and patient, which is you interview them and then you tell them that you forgot to press record, even though you didn't. And you just use it as a test to see what kind of person that person is. And if that person starts ripping you and telling, you that you're wasting my time is valuable, blah, 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 then you're dealing with an asshole. Now, Melanie Perkins is a case of a mission-driven, really nice person. Seriously. She's like Steve Jobs, but nice. And I cannot think of another person like that, actually.
Yeah. But no, look, you did well with Canva, mate. Like, that thing is just, and their ability to execute. Like, I've just watched from afar, and like, I'm in Melbourne. They're obviously in Sydney, and I've just seen the growth, and just even the way that they, approach SEO and all these other channels. Like, they are just fierce competitors, man, for any marketplace. Like,
they are a killing machine.
Yeah, seriously. Like, their ability to execute,
I'm 6,000 miles away, so it's not like I'm bragging about my own efforts and my own people. But I tell you something, I have never, ever seen a company that executes as well as Canva.
Yeah.
It is just a machine.
And that's obviously embedded from the culture, right? Like,
yes.
And the standards that are being set by the three co-founders.
Yes.
And she was working on...
it's in their DNA.
Yeah. Yeah, and she was working on Fusion Books, and I remember talking to her about that. This is a long time ago. I don't know about you, man. Do you do so many interviews over time you forget about them? This one I actually remember. Yeah. It becomes a huge blur. But they were working on that problem for a long time, even with Fusion Books beforehand.
This is the thing that makes school annuals, right?
Yeah. Yep. Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Well, dude, this is a ton of fun. We have to work towards wrapping up. A couple of questions. I want to ask you about your book. So, Dr. Jane Goodall, she wrote the foreword to your new book.
Yeah. Have you heard of her?
Yeah. So I'm curious around, how did this relationship form? What have you learned from her? And in the new book, you talk about 9 different paths to transform your life. What path did you take?
Okay. We'll ask the last one first. She took the path of a growth mindset along the same curve. She started with animals and she ended with animals, or she hasn't ended yet, but she started with animals and she's continued with animals and, chimpanzees and primatology, biology. Now, there are people who completely switch careers. That's also fine. It's just a different kind of growth. So that's the path she took. And I think there's 3 sections to my book: growth, grit, and grace. And growth is Carol Dweck. Grit is Angela Duckworth. And grace is Jane Goodall. Now, you asked me how I came to have her agree to write the foreword for my book, which, if you think about it, if you are a nonfiction author and you had a choice of anybody to write your foreword, Jane Goodall is right up. She may be number 1. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, right? I mean, maybe Nelson Mandela, but he's dead. I mean, yeah, there are not too many people as admired as Jane Goodall in the world.
Yeah.
So this going to be a long story for me to explain to you how I got to her, okay? I mean, I don't know if you have a time limit, okay?
Yeah, no.
So in the commencement address in 2015, Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I'm going to give you the world's best example of this concept. So in the 6th grade, I was in a elementary school, public school in Hawaii, in a lower middle class district. And a teacher told my parents to take me out of that school and put me in a private school, college prep school, because I had too much potential. Thank you, God, my parents listened to her. Thank you, God, my parents made the sacrifice for this to happen. So I get in this private school. I do well. I apply to Stanford, and I don't know, by some miracle, I got in. So now I'm at Stanford, and I'm loving Silicon Valley. And I meet this guy, and one of the primary ways we became friends is that we both loved cars. And he had cars, and I loved them but didn't have them. So we had a lot in common, except I didn't have any good cars. And we became very good friends. And years later, he was Apple's first software evangelist in the Macintosh division. And he reached back into his past and recruited me. And so I made this transition first from the jewelry business, shortly in the software business, very short time, and then to Apple. And the only reason why I got to Apple is because of nepotism, that this guy was my best friend in college. So now I'm in Apple, and I did well. I was very visible. So one day I get an email from somebody, and she says, you don't know me. I'm a Macintosh user, but I know who you are because I love my Macintosh. I run TEDx Palo Alto, and Jane Goodall has agreed to speak for us. I need someone to interview her on stage. Would you like to interview Jane Goodall? Would I like to interview Jane Goodall? So, of course, I say yes. I interview Jane Goodall. I become friends with her. A few years later, I'm starting my podcast, and, who better to start your podcast with than interviewing Jane Goodall? A few more years go by. We're still friends. I write this book called Think Remarkable. I use her example several places in the book, and I asked her and her communications person to write my foreword. The communications person said he will check, and then shortly thereafter, she said yes. But if you knew Jane Goodall's schedule, you'd actually be depressed. She travels so much. And when she travels, it's not like she's only on deck for that 1-hour keynote. She's visiting students and visiting schools and visiting, biological preserves and all that. She's busy 24/7. So anyway, she agrees. We get the foreword done, and I'm like happy as a clam. And so now, fast forward another year, and I'm making this course for Canva called How to Be Remarkable. And I want Jane to record a short video for this course. And I send the email to the same 2 people, Jane and the communications guy. And he tells me she's really too busy. She's in Africa right now. Next day, I get an email from her. She says, okay, guy, I'll do it. And then the next day, she says, all right, so we schedule a time, we get online, and the connections to Tanzania were terrible. So I tell her, just record the video by yourself and then send it to me. We don't have to be online to do this. Then I wait a few days, and she says, I'm free for 24 hours. I can do this. But the hut next to me, they're drilling for fresh water, so it's too noisy in Tanzania. So then I wait another few days, and then she has somebody shoot me a video of her talking about how to be remarkable in her room in Tanzania. So I'm telling you this whole long story with all these dots, but the dot that started it all was a teacher named Trudy Akau in Kalihi Valley Elementary in Honolulu, Hawaii in the 1960s. That's what led to Jane Goodall writing the foreword of my book.
There you go. Wow, what a crazy story. And it's so interesting to think around where you end up and the pathways and the sliding doors and how certain things work out to be. So you talk about the book. What compelled you to write it? You've written, you said 16 books, 15 books thus far.
So this is the sequence of events. So I've been doing this podcast for almost 5 years. We have, 225 or so episodes. And that means there's 225 hours of listening. There's also 5,000 pages of transcripts. And I looked at that. I said, there's so much information and inspiration in there, but you can't reasonably expect anybody to listen to 250 hours and read 5,000 pages of transcripts. So we need to filter this down. And I read a lot of nonfiction books as a podcaster. I basically read 1 or 2 a week to prepare for my guests. And I tell you something, lots of books. It's 250 pages to explain one concept. And I'm telling you that there's a lot of people who will not read 250 pages to understand one concept. Not at all. So I said, we got to take all this wisdom and this goodness down to under 200 pages. So my book is 170 pages, 3 sections, growth, grit, and grace, 9 chapters. And it explains the key concepts to make a difference and be remarkable. And we counted, there are 88 techniques in this book. So that means there's about 2 pages per technique. And we figured that's about right for Gen Z. Gen Z will invest reading 2 pages to get an idea. And also Gen Z is smart enough to understand that in 2 pages. So the genesis in this book is helping you make a difference and be remarkable.
Yeah, I love it. That's really cool. So when does the book come out?
It comes out March 6th in the United States. I don't know when in Australia. Probably simultaneously.
Yeah, that's okay. Look, most of our community, most of our audience is in the States.
Okay. March 6th, that's the magic day.
Okay. Awesome. And we're going to have to move to the hot seat round. We're almost at time. These are rapid fire questions and answers.
Okay, fire away.
All right. What business that you were a part of would you like another crack at?
Apple labeled software. When I was at Apple, I ran the Apple labeled software. So that was Mac Paint, Mac Write, Mac Draw, Mac Project, all the software that Apple sold. And it was spun off into something called Claris. And I wish I could have done that. I think it would be or still be a great software company.
What story from your past still inspires you?
Well, believe it or not, the Jackie Chan story really does inspire me. I'm telling you, it's my goal. I want people to confuse him for me, not me for him.
Yeah, love it. How can evangelism marketing help early stage founders?
Well, the beauty of evangelism, and you have to understand the definition of the word, is bringing the good news. So if you're a founder and you truly have products that are good news, that, make people's lives better, that they're painkillers, they're not just supplements, then evangelism is easy because evangelists have the other person's best interests at heart, not just their own. They're not just their quota, their bonus, their sales result. So when I tell you to use Canva, it's good for Guy, but it's also good for you. And I believe it's good for you. So the key to evangelism is create great shit, and then just people will support you that you would not believe. But, because what's the motivation for someone who's not an employee, not a stockholder, to evangelize your product? One is the satisfaction of helping your friends and colleagues do something better, relieve pain. Another is to be affiliated with something cool and hot and innovative. And another is, just the fun of being on the leading edge of technology.
Yeah, love it.
Wait, let me add one more thing. If you want to be an evangelist for your product, okay, number one skill is you need to be able to do a great demo. I mean a great demo. A demo is worth 1,000 slides, okay? So get off this whole, 60 slide, 25-page business plan. You need a 5-minute demo.
Love it. Okay, awesome. This is a good one just because you've met so many incredible people over the time. If you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Any entrepreneur, dead or alive. I have to say that I would love to have dinner with Steve Jobs. I mean, I wasn't in his circle of best friends. And now with a lot of hindsight, because I worked for him like in the 1987, not 1887, in the 1987 time frame. A lot has happened. It would be so fascinating to have dinner with Steve Jobs. Yeah, I think it would be Steve Jobs. Now, if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be? I would probably say Nelson Mandela.
Yeah. Okay. All right, last question. What are you excited about next? What are you excited about next?
Well, I'm extremely excited about AI. I think AI is a total shift and game changer. I think AI is a bigger deal than personal computers, internet, social media put together. Bigger, add in the steam engine, add in mass production, add in electricity, add in nuclear power. I think AI is the biggest deal we've ever encountered.
Love it. All right. Well, Guy, we will wrap there. That was incredible, man. I had a ton of fun. Thank you so much for your time and just giving back to our community.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, that was an absolute pleasure, man. And people know where to find your new book.
Listen, from the bottom of my heart, let me tell you that this book is tactical and practical. It's not 170 pages about one idea, about how you pivot or, how you do one thing. It's like an operating manual for entrepreneurship. It really is the best shot I have.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Thank you very much. All the best to you.
Yeah, thank you.
You can go have some Vegemite for me now.
Hey guys, if you love this episode, you've got to check out my interview with Davey Fogarty on how he finds trends in undercapitalized markets and turns them into multi-million-dollar businesses.
I'm generally looking for trends globally. We find trends that haven't been kind of capitalized in certain markets or in certain marketing channels.
Yes.
And then we also obviously add our flair to it. You need to differentiate your product